You know, if it wasn't for the Midnight Cowboy movie back in the 60s, I would have never known 42nd Street and all its perks. My name is Eric, and welcome to the craziness that lives inside my head. Today I want to talk about my experiences in the bathhouses from 1972 to 1992. That's a good 20 years. And I got the idea or a sniff of what was going on in the gay community from watching a movie called The Midnight Cowboy by John Voight and Dustin Hoffman. And in that movie, they had a scene from 42nd Street where the cowboys were standing in the doorways, hustling their wares. So, I was 18 years old? And I said, well, I'm curious. Took the train down to Times Square and walked down on 42nd Street between 8th Avenue and 7th Avenue. And yes, it was true. You had the cowboys standing in the doorways selling their wares. And because of that, I got into reading what they call the gay rags. Because back then, even though the gay community was pretty much still underground, but you had magazines and newspapers. And I saw an advertisement for a bathhouse. Not that far from 42nd Street, Times Square, called East Side Sauna. So I venture out there. That was my very first bathhouse I've been to. It's on 56th Street on the east side. And I go in there, and you buy a room, or rent a room. I should say you rent a room. I think it was $5 for a couple of hours. You rent a room. And when you go in there, I'm telling you, I just went along with, do what the Romans do. I saw the guys do this. I'm walking, and you didn't have to rent a room. I think they had peep shows in before you get to the rooms. Or you can rent a room, because if you meet somebody at the peep shows, you want to rent a room and fool around. So I didn't meet anybody, but I rented a room. And then I noticed as you walk down the hallway with these rooms, that guys had their doors open, laying naked. Some laying naked. Most of them weren't laying naked. I guess that's how they cruise. You walk down the hallway, you look in the room, you see something you like, you go in there. So I rented a room. And of course that didn't happen. Nothing happened. I sat there for a little while. I said, this is boring. So they had like this, if I can remember now, we're talking about back in 1972. They had something like a community room. Like a community room. That's where everybody meets. And I'm not sure they had a pool. I know I went to one bathhouse that had a pool. But you meet in this room. And they probably did have a sauna. That's why they call it a sauna. But to make a long story short, I met somebody that I fooled around with back in junior high school. I forget his name. He was my very first male guy that I fooled around with sexually with. And that had to have been in the 60s. And he was older than me. I think at that time I was in the 7th grade and he was in the 8th grade. So here we are, 4 years later. He sees me, he noticed me, and we go into the room that I rented out, and there we are. That's the first time I've been to a bathhouse. And that particular bathhouse, I did go twice. And the second time, I think it was two older guys that I fooled around with. When I say older guys, I had to have been like early 20s, and they had to have been in their 50s and 60s. So my second bathhouse that I can remember fooling around with is the St. Mark's Bath. Now I was on 8th Street or St. Mark's at St. Mark's Avenue, down on the east side in East Village, across from the Electric Circus. Yeah, I had to have been set 1974. I went there and nothing happened. Nothing too much happened at the bath. Wasn't crazy about the bathhouses. When you're 400 and some pounds, you don't get too much of a chance to do anything at 400 and some pounds, Or back in those days, maybe even now, they're looking for the guys with the muscular bodies and the well-hung guys. I mean, and usually, and it depends on what bathhouse you went to, because the one I went to in the East Sauna bath, the first one had an older crowd. St. Mark's had a young village crowd, so I wasn't going to fit in. And then the next one I could think that I went to, let me see, that was 74. And the next time I went to, I do remember the most famous one, because by this time, we're talking about 79, I had gay friends who was hipping me to what's going on in the gay community. And I went to Mount Morris Bath. At the time, I didn't live in Manhattan. I lived in Brooklyn. So I took that train all the way to Harlem. And I went to Mount Morris Bath. Now, that was where as you want to say, scored the most. Mount Morris Bath was right across from Mount Morris Park, off of 125th Street on the west side. I went in there, and yes, I wrote a book about it. It's in my book. And the last time I was in that bathhouse was in 1979, and maybe 1979, 1980, and it was with I talk about Raymond. Raymond was one of the steady guys of my life back when I was in my 20s and 30s. Anyway, that's the last time I saw Raymond, was in Mount Morris Bathhouse. And then I did go to the Wall Street Sauna. Now, the Wall Street Sauna is on Wall Street. Now, mind you, this is 1980, had to be summer. I think it was summer 1980. I heard about it. It was in the gay rags. That's where all the brokers and the executive go to. So I go, oh, why not? Why not go there? And maybe I'll meet up with an executive and stay home and be a housewife. So I went in there, and nothing happens. And yes, it was. Once I got in there, I realized I was not the Wall Street type that they would, Again, if you get that kind of money, you're gonna look for something that you're willing to take home, or pull up in a hotel for a while. Anyway, then came the thing about that part of the story. Wall Street. I did get a job on Wall Street. Actually, I got a job on Wall Street. I went to Wall Street Sauna. Had to be in June that summer. That fall in October, I got a job at the stock exchange. And when I got that job at the stock exchange, the scariest thing that I had to deal with is running into a broker who may have seen me at the sauna. And that time I was stupid. I wasn't thinking. I'm getting all scared. Oh, he see me at the sauna. He's gonna think highly of me. Or they may tell my manager or something. But then again, if they're not gonna say anything, because they had no business being in a gay sauna themselves, and I wasn't thinking in those terms. But that's how I was thinking. I was so afraid that somebody was gonna see me. So the next bathhouse I went to has a history. It was called the Everard. And I got hooked up with some friends that I worked with, Tom and Robert. And they took me to the Everard. Now, the Everard, if you Google it, had a fire back in the late 70s. I didn't go to the Everard till 1982, just before I got sober. I went there with my two friends. And the same thing, I was 400 pounds. They were just screwing their ass off, and I was just sitting in the little lobby there. They had a TV, and I remember sitting on the little couch and watching TV while everybody else was just screwing around. Nobody wanted to have sex with a 400-pound person. And the Everard was in, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was in Chelsea, the Chelsea area. And that was in 82, and that was the last bathhouse I've been to in my drinking days. I got sober, and my last bathhouse I've been to, because the next bathhouse I was sober maybe a good 10 years. No, 8 years. I was sober 8 years. I got sober in 84. In 1992, I heard so much about, I had new friends who didn't drink and drug, and I had friends who lived in, I should say I was going to AA, and my sponsor lived in Queens, and he used to talk about his drinking days, and he mentioned Northern Sauna. And then I had another friend I met at an OA meeting. I used to go to OA meetings, trying to lose weight, because I was an AA person, I was an OA person. And I met a friend there, and he would talk about the Northern Sauna. So I went to the Northern Sauna out of curiosity, and that was in 1992, and nothing happens. It was the same thing. I was 400 some pounds. People passed by me like I was, part of the furniture. Nobody paying attention to me. But I will say this, in retrospect to the last bathhouse I've been to, I did meet Tony. Now, Tony was off of the sex phone lines. Back in the day, and in the 90s, you had the internet, but you had the phone lines first. It was a sex line. They advertised in the gay rags. You call up, you call the number, and I think you leave a voice ad. You leave a voice ad, and of course you leave your phone number, but I don't even know you leave your phone number. You leave a voice ad. I know you left a voice ad. And then you'll call the number maybe an hour, 2 hours later, you call the number, and because you got to punch in your code, and they'll let you know if you have any mail. And I had mail. I had mail from this guy named Tony. And he came to the house. And that's another story. Let's be honest. He came to my house in the Bronx. He was from Queens. He came to my house from the Bronx. And we fooled around. And he was quite gorgeous. He was the first muscle-bound guy. I never went to bed with a muscle guy. He worked out 5 days a week. He was the first muscle-bound guy I ever fooled around with. And I was in love. He was in a relationship. So I was just going to be his side chick, as they say in today's world. I was just going to be his side chick. But I did take him to places that I go. I took him to the group I belonged to at the time called Bronx Men of the Bronx. And when I took him there, 2 of my friends knew who he was. And they both knew Tony from the Northern Sauna. They met him in the bathhouse. And of course, he tricked with them. Of course, he tricked with me. And he didn't trick. What I'm saying is, in the past, before I met them, he tricked with all 3 of us, not at the same time. But anyway, that is what I have to say about the bathhouse. That was my last bathhouse. It was 1992. The Northern Sauna on Northern Boulevard, across the bridge in Queens. Across the bridge, I think it was closer to the Queensboro Bridge. I lived in the Bronx, close to the Throsneck Bridge. I lived between the Throsneck Bridge and the Triborough Bridge. So, and plus I had a car at the time. Anyway, my name is Eric, and I hope you enjoyed this little piece of my experience in the bathhouses in the 1970s.